Good afternoon and welcome to the Gender Speaker live show on this gloriously sunny Saturday afternoon. So I'm not expecting too many people to be here with me live, but hopefully you'll catch up later. Anyway, today I'm talking about the whole process of managing a transition in the office. So yesterday I looked at the position more from the sort of trans person's perspective. Now we're going to look at what do you need to do if somebody in your office, somebody in your work transitions. So, managing the transition on the job process. What happens? Somebody walks into you and says, "Oh, I'm going to be changing my gender." And we know from yesterday, if you've looked at my show from yesterday, that they've already gone through a long process that's finally come to the point where they now have to make that decision. They have to make that change. So, a lot of pressure on them, a lot of fear, because it may be that nobody in the office knows. There's a whole range of possibilities of what's going on. So what do you do when somebody says, I'm changing my gender, male to female, female to male, going non-binary? Less of that. There's going to be, I suspect non-binary people just sort of blend into being non-binary. They're already fairly androgynous. But in some cases, people may say, that's it, I'm now becoming non-binary. And there may be a specific thing they want to do to change their gender, to change the way that people relate to them. So the first thing that you need to do with anything like this is ask them what they want to happen. And this is really important. Sit down with someone and listen. Listen to what they have to say. Listen to what their fears are. Listen to what their expectations are. They're the ones who've been hearing all the little comments in the background. They'll know what people feel. They'll be able to sort of measure the sense. And it, to a lot of extent, depends upon the kind of organization. I've helped quite a few organizations manage this process. I've helped the police force deal with, in one major area, deal with somebody who transitioned. I'll talk a little bit about that later. I've helped a quite large engineering company with consultants out in all sorts of places, and one of their senior managers transitioned. I've worked with the NHS, who've had people transitioning on the job. So all of these different organizations have different problems. Small chemical company that had a similar problem going on. Very male-dominated workforce, only 6 women out of about 500 employees, and suddenly one of their key managers announced that he was becoming female and was changing gender. So it brings up a whole stack of different challenges and different issues about what's going on. Now, if you're a public sector body in any way, if you earn money from the public sector, if you deliver work for the government, if you have government contracts, if in any way you generate income from the public purse, then you have a duty to prevent discrimination. And that's really important, because it's not about saying, oh, we'll just change gender and see what happens. You have to actually think, right, is there going to be a problem here? How can we tackle this? How can we prevent it from happening in the first place? And in any case, I think it's good practice. The law now says that anyone can change their gender. And why should that matter? Why should their gender really be an issue? Sadly, it is. And that's because we're from the moment we're born, we're coached into these roles of what it means to be man, what it means to be woman, what our expectations are. And we see sharp differences. And women already have huge problems in trying to establish themselves, in trying to develop a career in a world where most people perceive men to be the primary leaders in our world. So when women become leaders, we already struggle that we don't like women to act like men when they become leaders. We want women to act like women, but if they do, then we see women as not really strong enough to be leaders. Bit of a dichotomy there. I'm going to look at that sometime next week. So we're going to look a little bit more at some of the challenges between gender issues, not just about transgender. So first thing we're going to look at, I'm going to call it a memorandum of understanding or a transition agreement. And this is what you need to work to fairly quickly. in strict terms, anyone can just walk in one day and say, hi, I've changed gender. This is me from now on. Now, the chances are most people won't do that. Some do. And you have to deal with that. But if you can handle it and manage it a little bit better, particularly if it's senior person, but it's somebody who's going to be very high profile, then it's better if you can manage that whole process. I fortunately wasn't working for an organization when I transitioned, but I was doing a lot of work for different organizations, and some of them weren't very comfortable with me continuing to do that work. Others welcomed it. I actually thought it was amazing. So let's pop up the screen and have a little look at what we're going to do. Now, I think what I need to do is actually put it on the bigger screen. And today I'm still going to keep me down just in the corner, but we won't see an awful lot of this if I don't. I'm sorry, it's a bullet point slide presentation, but this is just what I've done. This is the sort of bullets that come out of a memorandum of understanding. And essentially what you're talking about is sitting down with somebody who's changing gender with a pre-prepared form, and it's usually better to prepare this in advance. So you've got a series of questions that you can discuss, and then you can write down the agreements about what's going to happen, sign it, and that's it. That's the obligations. That's what you expect the trans person to do. That's what the trans person expects of you. It's coming to a general agreement about how this process is going to be managed so that it actually works out the best possible solution, the best possible outcome for everybody concerned. So let's just have a look through some of the sorts of things that we're going to be looking at. First of all, this is a structured agreement. It's a step-by-step look at all of the things. And I think you might be a bit surprised because you think, oh, somebody's changing gender. You just get on with it. You'll notice now there's an awful lot suddenly needs to be thought about. So the first thing, do they want to stay in the same post? Now, in large organizations like the NHS, for example, that may not even be possible. For example, if someone living as a woman now transitions to live as a man, but has worked in a psychiatric geriatric ward for female ward, it might no longer be appropriate for them to work in that. It may be that male staff are fine, but some intimate care work is specifically allowed by the Equality Act. You're allowed to say this work must be done by women. So when someone says, I'm now male, they can't do that work. Now, there may also be issues where somebody transitions to female and you may decide, actually, no, we don't want them to. But that's, they're not going to be in a post as male where they can't remain in it. But sometimes you may find somebody just simply can't remain in the post. It's inappropriate. Maybe it's a post which is more dangerous for women. I don't know. I used to have a lot of salesmen on the job going out, and I found that women really uncomfortable if they had to go and call on people in their homes, put them into all kinds of difficult situations. And I would prefer and try to make a situation where the women were able to work in a safer environment from the office. But individual organizations need to look, are there circumstances? Do they want to remain in the post? Is it appropriate for them to remain in the post? It's a discussion you need to have. I don't know what the answers are. Does anybody else in the organization know about their plans? Is it going to be a complete surprise to everybody, or are there one or two people who already know? And really what we're looking at here is possible buddies. Are there people here who will be able to support them, help them, be a champion for them if they come up against some difficulties? I was quite surprised at just how different life was for me when I changed gender. Behaviors, the way I behaved. And even now, I still get people say to me, oh my God, that was a very masculine way of dealing with it. I thought, well, what they meant was I was very assertive. And men are taught to be assertive. And it's actually it's a good quality. We actually like men to be assertive. We like men to be strong men, to make decisions and, put their foot down. That's it. But when women do the same level of assertion, then we actually think they're really a bit bossy. And women get a negative steer all the time if they act in the same way that we expect men to act. So women have to learn how to manage and be assertive, but in a way that doesn't feel like they're doing it the way a man would. Because, like it or not, we have different expectations of gender. We expect women to be kinder. And if they're not, then we see them very negatively. And that then has a knock-on effect in how well they're perceived for future promotions, etc. Now, I wish it wasn't this way, but this is the world we live in. What we're looking for are buddies. Is there somebody there can, if they go into the toilet, maybe they can go to the toilet with a trans woman, so a trans woman doesn't feel quite so uncomfortable walking into the female toilets at work for the first time. It can be a very scary experience. Same for trans men. Need buddies, meet people who can actually be friends with them. And if they already have those friends who know about it, then that's good to be able to work with. How and when and how should staff be informed? So are they just going to walk in on Monday morning and that's it? Or are we going to have a briefing session? Are we going to send an email out to everybody to tell them what's going on? Now, what I've found has happened in quite a few of the instances that I've worked in, the trans person themselves have said, no, I would like to write a letter to not the whole company, because they don't work with everybody in the company, but certainly the people that they do work with, their close work companions. And an email goes out to everybody saying, look, big changes happening in my life. I know some of you know about this, but others of you, this might be a bit of a surprise. I've been battling with this all my life, and I've now decided I'm going to change gender, with effect from and then the date, and they tell them what's going to be happening. Now, what's also useful, I think, and in most cases where I've been working, the chief executive or the top senior manager, somebody in, very high in the organization, it's also really helpful if they send out a letter. And that's the one that can go to absolutely everyone. Now, I say absolutely everyone. It may be that the decision when you're talking about this is that you don't want everybody to know. In a very large organization, maybe it's better to keep this within the area where everybody works. If there's not a huge amount of communication going on, if not very many people know, then why do you need to tell the world? Got to think about confidentiality as well. The more people you tell, the more chance there is that somebody might not like it, somebody might have a go, somebody might stir things up. Don't want that. So it is quite helpful anyway in an organization, particularly if everybody does know everybody. Letter from the top saying, or email from the top saying, this is what's going on. We're really proud of this person there. A very valued employee. Please, it's a difficult time for them, so please be supportive. That kind of email. That's the sort of thing that I've helped and that people have drafted that sent out that works quite well. Who informs managers and staff? So there needs to be some kind of briefing through managers and staff so everybody's aware that this is going on. So although you may not tell everybody in the organization, at a management level, you probably need to know, because the grapevine will carry it anyway. It'll start to carry on that somebody's changed gender, and you need to make sure that that's being handled as well. What training or briefing will be required and by who? So in my experience, it is nearly always better to bring in someone from outside to do this, unless you have well-trained and well-equipped learning and development or training staff who understand this. But it's often helpful to get somebody, and this is why I've got called into quite a lot of organizations, because they've brought me in. I'm a trans woman. I understand the issues. I can talk about it. I can answer questions. There are no difficult questions because I've answered them all. I've had them from just about everybody. And I've got a structured training program that I can then deliver and do very often deliver in these sorts of situations. All we need to decide is how long. And it's usually quite short briefing sessions. I found it. You don't need big, full transgender awareness programs for this. It needs to be a relatively short, maybe an hour, enough time to talk about what trans means, why people are doing it, and time for people to ask questions. And that's why it's probably better that it's done from someone outside, because I have no emotional attachment to what's going on and I can deal with that. It's not a good idea generally to try and get the trans person themselves to get involved in the training. It becomes too emotional, too personal, and too many personal questions about, oh, what's going to happen to your wife, what's going to happen to your husband, those sorts of things. Because a lot of trans people, when they transition, especially late in life, are married with families, and that's all been part of their cover to try and hide the fact that they're transgender. So, what about time off work before transition? I tend to recommend this when I'm working with clients, although not everybody does it. Sometimes people say, no, I just want to come in on Monday and that's it. I don't want to stay. In one situation, it was done over Christmas. So somebody went back off just before Christmas. They took a couple of days early. Emails went out to everybody to explain what was going to be happening in the new year. Joe will be coming back as Jenny, fake names. And everybody was then aware of it. And after Christmas, Jenny came back to work, and that was it. And there's been this time. Now, one of the reasons I think it's a good idea for this time gap is because it actually takes time for the person themselves to adjust to new behaviors, adjust to making sure you're walking right, adjust to getting more practice at getting up every day and living the part of being female. You haven't had 18 years of practice growing up before you become an adult and go out into the world. All of a sudden, bang, you're there. I took makeup lessons. I went to deportment classes. I had consultations with image consultants to try and get clothes that worked and fitted me better. Let's not go there. So lots of things you need to do to learn. I mean, I didn't even know what accessorizing was. I had no clue. Yeah, I do now. I don't know. And when do they want to start working in the new gender? What's the date? So we've got this date fixed. So all of this is an agreement that you set to. There is more. So let's kind of have a look now at what's happening once we got that. Now we've got to start thinking they're going to change gender. What records need to be changed? Now, bear in mind that once they have gone through transition and then they maybe get a gender recognition certificate a couple of years down the line. I mean, this point is probably the start of the 2-year process of living in gender before they can actually apply for a gender recognition certificate. But you won't know when they get the gender recognition certificate. So it's important to work on the assumption that they have one. Because if details of their gender are disclosed to somebody outside the organization without permission, then that's a criminal offense. We talked about this when we looked at the Gender Recognition Act. Some people are entitled to their privacy, and they may choose to pass. They may actually pass quite well. They may go into their gender within 2 years, particularly for trans men. I've seen this. But once they start taking testosterone, start growing a beard. Very often hair starts to fall out because of male pattern baldness. Voice drops very distinctly within a couple of years. But most trans men do not look as if they've ever been women. Trans women, it's a bit more difficult, particularly if they're quite big, bulky men. Transitioning is a bit more of a challenge. But then look at Caitlyn Jenner. Here we're talking about a top decathlete who changes gender to become female and is now voted Woman of the Year and looks, really passes, very well known. But if you were just meeting in somewhere, apart from the fact that she's quite tall, you may not actually pick that up. And I've met a lot of trans women who pass. They just pass as women. Nobody even realizes, and that's how they want it to be. They just get on with it. So a lot of people don't want. So we need to get those records changed, and it needs to be so that you then got to make a decision. Who can get access to that later? Staff ID cards and security, that all needs to be tackled with, especially if you need pass cards and security cards to get into buildings and such like. And you need to make sure that confidentiality is maintained, that only authorized people can access past records. You will need to keep some, but they should be sealed so that the only easily available employment records are those which show the client as the person in their new gender. There may be some implications around pensions and such like, and insurance. Those need to be looked at. Most of them have been fairly well resolved now, but there's still a few. And what about dress code? I've been talking as if it's maybe as a senior person. It might be. Maybe it's somebody who works in a staff where there are different uniforms for male and female staff. Those need to be sorted out. And, that might be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. Bigger trans women will suddenly find that something made for a bigger woman doesn't easily fit because you're sort of big in the wrong places. Access to toilets and changing facilities. This is one of the biggest challenges that every organization will face when someone changes gender, when a trans person comes into the organization. But particularly when everybody is known for a long time, and it tends to be where it's someone changing male to female. There are still problems with female to male, but the bigger problems that I've noticed, and the negative media coverage tends to be related to trans women. Oh my God, it's a man in the ladies' toilet. They're going to attack people. Well, and because we've had all this silly thing at the moment with J.K. Rowling deciding to write a book where she's taken a transvestite who's a hidden serial killer and uses dressing as a woman to attack other women. And it's particularly irritating because she's already made huge statements, very loud statements about her opposition to trans women having access to women's spaces. I use female toilets. I use female changing facilities very considerately. I don't parade around naked anywhere. I just use a little cubicle. I sort myself out. Nobody knows. I make sure of that. They might try and guess, they might suspect, but I'm very careful to not offend anyone. I don't want to upset anyone. I simply want to use the facility so I can go swim, I can go and use the gym or whatever the facility is. Well, in workplaces, sometimes there are changing facilities, especially if it's a factory or somewhere. I had a friend of mine changed gender, and a couple of women there really, really took exception to this. And before they knew what had happened, a petition had been signed by 40 members of staff to stop this trans woman friend of mine from using the female changing facilities. And it was very difficult and very awkward to deal with. It was finally sorted out, and it was sorted out amicably. The union got involved, and the union was very clear on what the policy is. Trans women use female facilities. Now, you might need to do some transition. So it might be you need some gender neutral toilets, or there's some disabled toilets that are made available as gender neutral. I don't have the answers on this. Unfortunately, it's one of those things you have to sit down and talk about. Talk to other staff, talk to other people that might be concerned, and make sure that whatever is being done works. What definitely can't work, and I've seen happen before, is where trans women has had to walk halfway across a plant to get to a building, half a mile away in order to use the toilets, and that is not appropriate at all. I think we all tend to think, in the workplace, it's just in a workplace. Very often when I'm dealing with this is people working across huge areas. One of the challenges when working with a police force, a homicide police force, the person changing gender was a police officer. And that got picked up, of course, by the press. The then News of the World decided that they were going to feature this because somebody in the police force didn't like it, thought it was actually not okay. This is in the days when the police were still trying to get together with all this, back in about 15 years ago. And the press were then hounding and trying to find this police officer. The name hadn't been given out. We tried to keep that quiet. And I suddenly got a phone call from the local media saying, could you come into the radio station to talk about this? Could you come on Look North and talk about this? And the issue that I saw, because I'd done a lot of the work to help them in putting together the program of how they dealt with it. And what had happened was they'd done some training. And they decided that what they would do is take one division the division where this particular policewoman worked, and they would train everybody, but they would do it over a 5-week period. And the thing was that what they had was a 5-week briefing program where everybody attended over a period of 5 weeks. Everybody got trained on something. They can't take everybody in at once because everybody's working, people on holiday, people on leave, etc. So what they did was to make sure that they had briefing sessions. And this is a constant cycle of briefing sessions always going on. So they just slotted transgender awareness in as the primary topic over a 5-week cycle to make sure everybody was trained. Well, the press decided this was the police spending hundreds of thousands of pounds of taxpayer money on training just to help the sensibilities of one tribe. Completely and totally wrong. It was utterly, they handled it absolutely perfectly, and we managed to sort it. But can you see the kind of challenges and issues? If you are a large organization, if you're a bit in public profile, then there is a chance, sometimes less so now, but a chance that the media might decide to have a go. So, liaison with customers or partner organizations. One of the organizations I helped, one of their senior engineers transitioned, and they worked extensively with a couple of their big clients that were also engineering companies, out as consultants working. They were consultant engineers. So they had to work the process. So the process didn't just affect their organization, it also affected the customer organization. So training was arranged and organized over a period of a week so that people on a voluntary basis could come into a couple of hours training session where we talked about this and how, and lots of questions, an hour and a half, I think, each session. Worked extremely well. But it was done in conjunction with the customer, with the clients and this partner organization, so that everybody was aware. You may have somebody changing gender who's a salesperson, and therefore they've got clients that they're going to deal with. How do you deal with that? I don't know the answers. Can make suggestions, but basically that's the purpose of this memorandum. As you sit down, you discuss all the topics that are going to be impacted as a result of the change and come up with some solutions. If the trans person is going through full medical transition, then they're going to have time off work. When they do the full the gender reassignment surgery, that generally involves for trans women a period of at least 3 months off work. For trans men, it can be longer. It can be 6 months, it can be a year, and it can be a number of different surgeries taking place. So with all trans people, there is going to be time taken off. It needs to be covered, and you need to make sure that's dealt with within the agreement. And limits to physical work. Once somebody's gone through some quite difficult surgery, their body's going to be a bit weaker. The reason they're off work is to allow the body to heal. But even then, coming back, a trans woman isn't going to be able to carry on doing the kind of work that they might have done when they were male. Now they'll have been on estrogen for a couple of years, and that will have resulted in them becoming a lot weaker and less able to handle the physical work that they were able to do before. So I'm not going to go into any more, but that's, can you see, it's not a simple and easy transition. It's not simply a matter of sort of jumping in and say, oh, someone's changing work. There are a lot of things to think about, and the key is to sit down with the trans person, make an agreement, just look at all the things that are impacted by their transition. Now, that's going to be different for every organization, but think about all those things and just make an agreement. How do we handle this? What do we do about that? How would we handle that? Thing I've always wondered is, somebody phones up the office, says, oh, can I speak to Bob? What do you say? Oh, it's Mary. Now I'll put you through. No, you can't do that. So you have to have some arrangement for what happens when somebody comes and asks for a person by their previous name. How do you handle that? In the main, the best thing is to phone the person concerned and say, got a phone call coming in for you. They asked for Bob, haven't told them anything. I'll leave it to you. But you need to have thought about it in advance, because otherwise you're going to blurt out something and it's going to be uncomfortable, a bit difficult. It's all a matter of trying to get records. So trans non-binary inclusion training, I'm putting up a course in October. It's going to be mid-October. I'm at the Professional Speaking Association online business summit for the first week of October, which is looking to be an amazing event. I might tell you a bit more about that later, because it's really an excellent event. Anybody interested in speaking definitely wants to be there. That's the 5th to the 10th of October, and you can find it at thepsa.co.uk. And tomorrow I'm going to be shifting on talking a little bit about transgender awareness training and what you need to include in it and how it needs to work. And we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of other things to do with, that's basically gender inequality is the issue I want to try and tackle next week. So hope you're having a great weekend, enjoying this fabulous sunshine with this Indian summer that we're on. I'm going to just shift us out to there, and I'm going to go and I guess time to mow the lawn. See you tomorrow.